My name is Wilfred Lambert. I work for the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes out of Poplar, Montana. I am the Brownfields coordinator. I look for property for redevelopment. I also do phase one assessments and asbestos training, lead-based paint, and a little bit of meth testing for our housing authority.
I currently manage the Brownfields Multipurpose Grant and the Tribal Response Program grant. My job is inventorying the community and also outreach to the schools, to the community members. I can talk about different areas, whether it's air quality, water, brownfield, solid waste, hazardous waste. The Beeline Dragway had a gravel pit where everything was dumped. We went to the community centers with seniors and to different events, Earth Day events, and we asked what they wanted to see out there. It was kind of a consensus that they wanted green space. We got together with some universities to help envision it and planning it and make it kind of like a community garden, but for education. Now we are using it to host events for the high schools, host events for the seniors, and event theirs for Earth Day. So this is a site with the vision that the community had has actually come into play. We are using it to take kids out there and to take people out there and say, this used to be a brownfield site. We were able to clean it up, teaching them about solid waste, hazardous waste, contamination, and the bad things that could happen. And we went out and we planted, and we're seeing all these trees growing. So we're learning about environmental subjects in a site that used to be a brownfield, and also teaching them to have an interest in taking care of their land.
We had an old Poplar airport. It was a crop dusting site, and we had a lot of issues with herbicides, pesticide spills within the site. We did a phase one assessment, and we had a cleanup grant to get the property cleaned up. And we did the Make It Right houses. We had 20 Brad Pitt houses rebuilt on the airport. And we also just built a $25 to $30 million wellness center. There's kind of a clinical side to it we have a high diabetes rate. They have nurses there to check your blood pressure and all that stuff. So we reused the site a lot. We're also planning to build more housing houses on it and a new Head Start building for our kids. It took us about 5 to 8 years to get the funding all together for the site to clean up.
Hi, my name is Mickey Hartnett with the Kansas State University Tribal Technical Assistance to Brownfield program. I spent 25 years with US EPA, and I oversaw the cleanup of over 50 federal facilities with lots of issues. When I retired from EPA, I became a circuit rider with the tribes, assisting them with brownfield sites, the KSU Tribal TAB program. I worked with Fort Peck tribes up in Montana, Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and Northern Cheyenne Tribe, Fort Berthold, 3 affiliated tribes in North Dakota, and Spirit Lake Nation and Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, just to name a few. Some of the issues and challenges we dealt with included burnout buildings and homes that had been sitting there for years. Also, quite a few of the old schools that were very hazardous. Dealing with those that brought out a lot of the community and cultural issues. Brownfield sites, it's not all science and contamination. There are many issues to deal with.
One of the biggest challenge is getting everybody to want the same thing, to agree for the cleanup and to agree on, do we want to see developers come in here and see what they can bring to the community, or do we want to see tribal governments? Do we want to have more housing for ourselves, more housing for the kids that are just getting out of the house to go to college and maybe just want to be on their own? The second challenge is the funding aspect, because the community wants something. However, the council may look at it, but what is the main priority at the time? Do we need more schools? Do we need more mental health? Do we need more police? Or do we bring in a developer to bring a store in? So the council has to look at what the priorities are as far as cost. They have to look at whether the area is zoned for housing or commercial or agricultural.
We have a lot of issues with reuse because we don't have zoning ordinances. We develop zoning ordinances in certain areas along the reservation. But our biggest issue is for getting all the entities involved. But we usually work together pretty good to figure out how we get things done around here.
My name is Michaela Paulette Shirley. I am the program manager at the University of New Mexico's Indigenous Design and Planning Institute. We will get an inquiry developing the what ifs. The first step in that process is helping them to determine what kind of contaminants are there and has there been any sort of assessments done. It's a matter of us just presenting them with a game plan for like how we're going to go about the community engagement process to solicit input about what they want to see the site becoming. We discover is there's a nostalgia to a historic past. Oftentimes it does take an outsider to help move that conversation along. Communities have run into the issue of it just becoming stagnant. You just have these ebbs and flows of infusion of energy that comes into a project. And so we just sort of help remove any barriers to that conversation so that the community can move forward in a much more positive and meaningful way. We're very clear and upfront about our intentionality that the voice of the community is inputted into the report. We've found community members just being totally disengaged because this is just yet another iteration to a conversation that they've already added to, and there was no fruitful manifestations of what they had said prior, and you end up working with community members that have unfortunately become jaded. And so that's why we really stress to our partners in the beginning the need to have those clear expectations around what that community engagement is going to look like. We definitely want to empower our community members who are involved in our engagement process to really feel safe and to feel comfortable doing that.
We have a planning committee I'm on, me in the planning office, and we have different entities like historical, tarot, T-ship, OEP, my office, just other entities that we worked together and we went and interviewed the students, elders, and then we just took it to a designer. And with the engineer, he put all the stuff together and where we can put buildings. So then we submitted it to council. Then we had a bunch of issue with council because we kind of want to designate one area or industrial because we needed someplace to put our road department with all their heavy equipment and stuff. So we wanted it close to the highway. It's a very successful project for our area. Before we went to council, we made sure we had everything covered from the little kids to the elders, what our intentions were. So we had all our I's dotted and T's crossed. There was a lot of communication that we had because we looked at all of the what ifs, what possible questions that as a council member they would ask.
Community for us ends up being the tribal members. It's up to council and the community to figure out what our actual needs are. So when I say community, I mean community members. So for example, I just went to a senior breakfast. We have pretty good participation. This is a moment where we present, and at the end of the presentation, we give out surveys or we let them ask questions and we record all these questions. I gave out a survey and I had a lot of community members wanting parks and wanting housing. I had a small percentage that wanted small grocery stores because they didn't want to drive so far away. So this information was all compiled and is being submitted to our department and is going to be shared with the planning division. And they'll take that up the chain, not only in different meetings of planning for the site, but in meetings where we go ask for new funding for different projects. So the council will look at zoning, will look at the cost, is it feasible, and we'll look at the needs. So at the end of the day, yes, the council does make the decision, but perhaps they can say, okay, community is right. Maybe housing is a priority at the moment. Maybe we have seniors that don't have cars, so they need a grocery store that is nearby so that they can get there, maybe even walking. So I would say it's kind of meshed together.
The key is a lot of early involvement and a lot of explaining of what and why and letting people voice their opinions and thoughts. We went to the effort of actually having a visioning session. And we brought in council members, community members, people from other tribal programs, even some younger folks. kind of a cross section of the community. We did a whole visioning session to figure out what the issues and thoughts were. Artists developed drawings and renderings of what they thought the future of their property could be. It's helped to give them something to move them along because it's a large, complex site. But I think even having those artist drawings helped them give them an idea of what the future could hold for that property, gave them something to shoot for. Don't hesitate to reach out both to tribal leadership, council, and so forth, as well as community members, and make sure they have some say-so and input to what's going on.
It is very important to understand and remember why it is you came into the process of trying to redevelop a site. And oftentimes that intention comes from wanting the best for your community. And so I think holding on to that is going to be something the local champion will have to bear, because it's something that is a value should be a value to everyone. I have colleagues who have been at this work for years, and it's like finally there's a light at the end of the tunnel when resources start to come into the community in a manner that is probably like monetary or even interest from like local government. And so I think that's the trick, is just like holding on to the energy that you're investing into the project from the very beginning. If you are not getting support in your community from your local leaders, then I think it's okay to be frank and honest, to have a heart-to-heart conversation with folks so that they can all get on the same page. And once you get on that same page, just keep up the momentum as best as you can. Part of that then too involves a big process in being able to manage expectations around what the outcome is going to be after a particular point, or even just being transparent about where everyone is at within that process. Just being honest about where everything is at and how challenges are being brought on.
Our community of Poplar is called the Oil City. We have a lot of oil activity north of us. So pretty much anywhere you dig in Poplar, you're going to hit contaminated soil. So with my program, I do the phase 1 on the site, and then we write a sampling plan, we submit to EPA. And with that sampling plan, we make sure that the sites are cleaned good enough for a daycare. And if it's too big of a site, we work with another entity called Great Northern Development. And they help us find more funding and stuff for certain sites like this that we can't get cleaned up. If we can't clean it up, we will designate that area as a land. We'll work with the BIA and tell the BIA that you can't build like certain buildings on this house because of the soil contamination. For the remediation part, it took a while to get all the documents done because we used brownfield money for the cleanup. And phase 2 and phase 3 of the sites. For the redevelopment part of it, we look for anything out there. The planning office has stuff that they have. Road department has plans for sidewalks, and main thing is infrastructure. You need somebody from the IHS to help with the infrastructure part, water, sewer, electricity, whatever else you need.
So I've walked site with council members. Sometimes it was a member from that district or segment of the reservation. Having council involved, I think, is very important, because a lot of times there's a lot of other funding sources, other parties that need to get involved and can help make a project successful. That's where the planning comes in, to look at the big picture of what's needed in a community so you can start developing plans. And even land that's been contaminated maybe had to have institutional controls put on it, like fences put around it saying keep out.
It's better knowing how much something is going to cost and not being overwhelmed by what the cost is going to take to become what the community envisions, because that way you at least aspire toward reaching that financial commitment. It's worse if you don't know how much something is going to cost, because you're just guessing, and then you're expending so much energy into something that you're not sure what it's going to cost.
Planning is the key word. We can do a better job and a more cost-effective job if you start with the answer and work backwards. That you have to do that visioning and figure out what could be the best uses in the future and what could go where. And if you kind of know what that future could look like, then you can bring that vision of that future back to the present and say, okay, that helps to guide us.
Work with all your agencies, the BIA especially, BIA, all your other programs within your tribe, road department, T-ship, planning office, and also our housing authority. You got to work a lot with them to make sure that they have property to build. On our planning committee, we have an entity from every department that's involved with any kind of development on a reservation. IR, road department, BIA, Artero, housing, the police, and every office has a seat on our planning committee.
As long as there's an understanding in the community about how long something is going to take, is better than just trying to do something with no result. Their ideas for a redevelopment often become something that is going to address all of the problems. I think in doing that, it does make it unimaginable to see how the project is going to move forward, because if you're trying to address your local economic development, it's to entail some sort of job creation. And if your community is facing like public health issues related to diabetes, then how is this site going to also help aid in the reduction of diabetes in our community? And if there is a broader community challenge around education that fits our culture or identity of the place, then the site also needs to have that too. And so I think in trying to imagine what the site is and its potential, just being very mindful about how you want to stagger the different ways that the site is going to help. And maybe also even accepting too that the site might only be feasible for just addressing the educational needs and not the public health or the economic.
To not lose hope, some sites can end up taking forever to clean up because at the beginning you didn't plan ahead or you didn't know what was going to come up, what kind of contamination you were going to find. So look at different resources of funding, not only brownfields, but other federal funding. If you have a big priority, a big list of brownfield sites and have them lined up, also have your ducks in a row. If you have a little bit of funding to at least do a phase one, if you can do a phase one internally, when funding does become available, you'll be ready to do it. And even once you have this background information, this is something you can take to your council and say, this is something that we think you should put your money on. So then there's also leverage funding. You might have funding from the community and you may have some funding from any federal grant or EPA grants. So I would say be prepared, be organized, figure out what's most important. Just don't lose hope and just keep bringing it up. Go to different meetings and keep bringing up this site that you think is important. Because sometimes you keep bringing it up and then the community starts asking more questions and they start learning more about it and they start wanting to know more about it. And they're the ones that are going to bring it back to council and say, we want you to listen, we want you to put money into this.